Hey everybody, it's Joey. Um, I wanted to make a video about the day I died. I watched Jeremiah Cohen's channel, and he had a video out, and I don't know about for you guys, but for me sometimes, because my memory is has been pretty much, I have a really bad memory, and I don't know why. Well, I have an idea, a couple of reasons why. But anyway, there are some times that when we watch each other's videos, and I think that's why it's so important that we make videos, because there could be something that I say that might get you to remember something or will resonate with you and your spirit. And then you can just kind of, there's a connection there. And so, anyway, so Jeremiah did a video the other day called You Have to Lose Your Life. And it brought back for me an experience that I had when I first woke up in 1995. And I usually to I joke about it sometimes with people. I don't talk about this with just regular, people that I might be, at the VA with, or this is just kind of something that I share here on YouTube and can talk about and feel connected. Because if you're someone going through this, you're going to hear those terms that are used as far as targeted individuals or gang stalking. You don't just happen to hear those terms unless there's a reason, unless you're being targeted, I believe. It's just not, those aren't terms that are just thrown around. So anyway, I wanted to, when he talked about you have to lose your life, I remember the day I died. Now, over the last, 95, I don't even know the math anymore, okay? I have a hard time with math as well, but there has been so many times, so many attempts on my life. And then also there has been several times where I was near death. But when I titled this video "The Day I Died" in 1995, during that summer when I first woke up, there was an encounter that I had in my living room, and it talks about it in the Word is where Paul says, about 14 years ago, I don't know if I came up or somebody came down, but he was in the Spirit. I can only liken it to that. I was in my living room, but in a blink of an eye, in a moment's time, it seemed like I feel like what I've heard Christians say, like using Christian lingo, is it seemed like I got a download from heaven. I didn't have like an out and out open vision where I saw this, but in my spirit, and I can remember this as clear as day. It was like there was a long line of people, and they were all looking down at that time. And I think now they were looking at their cell phones, and that was a line of people going to hell, of souls that were going to be going to hell. And then every so often I could hear, okay, somebody, like, it was like, okay, I won't say this, but I will say this. It was like a chariot had pulled up. Someone had pulled up, and it was one of the targets, and they were kind of plucked out of this line, and they were taken, and you could hear them, scream. It was one of those awful yet unbelievable kinds of screams where, when I heard them, it was like they were being taken from this line, and they were being deployed wherever, they were being dropped. But in that instant, I remember knowing in my spirit, and then in my heart, and in my person sitting there, that everything that we have been told, everything I had been told growing up, was a lie. Not that there was anything really, devious about it or insidious about it, but that the American dream, growing up, all little girls dream about their wedding day, getting a job, having a family, having a home, everything, Friday night football, games, pizza night on Saturdays, family time, everything that people think about as far as what makes them have a successful life, or what college are you going to go to, what art school are you going to apply to, what sports teams are you going to play on, what are your favorite sports, what are your hobbies, what are your interests. And I remember none of that mattered. It was all a lie. And I remember in that moment feeling the deepest sorrow and the deepest shock that I've ever felt in this. And I'm talking about through several fires. I have been in house fires, and several times I've been held at gunpoint. Several times I've been tied up with a gun to my head. There was a time when I was active duty military and I had come home for the weekend. I had been being poisoned with trace amounts of arsenic, cyanide, and antifreeze, and they were in my shampoo and my sweet tea. And over a period of time, they had eaten a hole through my intestine. And I remember I had told my first sergeant, or my platoon sergeant, if I don't make it back, come and look for me. And they actually ended up, and it was Columbus Day weekend, 2005. So we just celebrated we're in 2018. So that with that passing, it was another reason why this kind of jogged in my memory too, about, near death experiences. But that day, okay, so it's very, very, very hard to talk about this. So if I kind of skip around or lose my track of train of thought, it's because, this seems like since 1995, it seems to me like it's been one big giant time warp. I joke around and say that I was cryogenically frozen, like on Demolition Man, where they defrosted those two actors, Sandra Bullock's in it, not Denzel Washington, Wesley Snipes, and but they were frozen as part of a punishment, and then they got defrosted. Even though they were frozen, their minds were still very much active and awake. That's what this whole thing has felt like. It feels like I'm still 24 years old, which is how old I was when all of this happened. Yet I'm 47 years old. It feels like I didn't progress as far as, it seems like life just stopped, like as I knew it, and it did. Life as I knew it, life as I thought it was going to be, completely halted, and everything got turned upside down. And it was one supernatural encounter after the next supernatural encounter after the next, layered on top of each other, day after day, year after year, decade after decade. Most of it was, and the thing too, I've heard recently too, it's kind of like, it feels like it's a cosmic chess match that's going on. And it's like the devil makes a move and then God makes a move. The devil makes a move and then God makes a move. And I think that's why it's so important that when something happens to me, that I don't respond and I don't react. And as a person that's dealing with trauma, compound trauma, severe, PTSD, it's a skill that I have to learn now, is when something, life just it could just be life, something goes wrong, not to instantly react or respond, but to wait, because then God has his opportunity to answer. So in 1995, when I'm woken up, when the light people came to town, when God came to town, because I really felt the presence that it was God. Initially I didn't think that it was, I didn't think about the gang stalking, but it was like God came first and then the weird stuff started quickly thereafter. And, God's a lot of different things. And every season, he can be, one time he can be a judge. I was certainly in trouble. I'm certainly, around him. And there was authority figures, God can show up as authority figures with the law, or, with police, with judges. And, but he can also show up as a loving father. And that's how I'm getting to know him, not only as a loving father, but as a husband and as a provider. It says it in the word too. It talks about it, Psalm 45. It talks about that all over the place, really. And he's a provider. He's our husband. He's our maker. And so I don't see him anymore as like this God that I've ticked off and that I'm out of grace, or I'm disqualified. Because I was someone that never really was taught about him. So I everything that I've learned has been directly, from him himself. He does use his people. to help teach as well. But, not being raised in the church and not having a, family or whatever that studied the word together or anything like that, actually, couldn't be anything further than that from that. But, I think God will break in and reveal himself. But I wanted to go back to what that video, what it was talking about as far as losing your life. And my heart goes out to all of those that are targeted, because I feel more and more like it's a target. We're targeted by God. And because we are chosen, many are called, but few are chosen. We have the opportunity. I mean, God's not a bully. He doesn't impose anything. We have free will. He wants voluntary, wholehearted lovers of him. And there's an opportunity and there's the invitation that gets extended to us. And, the thing is that he already knows if we're going to say yes. He is the Alpha and the Omega. He's the beginning and the end. And, I remember that day, just first of all, just the shock that God was real and God was alive, and more that, along with, I have his attention for what purpose? What's the point here? And, but the sorrow and the sadness that I felt, having to grieve, really, it is about grief and loss too. Because when you come to the understanding that everything that we're raised to believe, from childhood, it couldn't be anything further from the truth. And the sorrow and the sadness I felt for all of those people that were on their way to hell and didn't even know it. They were all completely blinded to the line that they were saying. That I was very aware that these people were in line to go to hell. And then every so often, it would be like a chariot of fire, I would say, would come. That's the only way, the words that I could find to explain what it was like when one of them was scooped up and taken away and you could hear them scream. It was like, no, it was like great and horrible and terrible and wonderful all at the same time. People waking up and realizing what the reality is. And the reality is that it's all about God and it's all about Jesus. And the choice is ours, and their invitations is extended. But it was shocking. It was overwhelming to even have this happen to me. Then I went into a very, very long journey of, as time went on, it was very, very fresh and very raw and I was totally freaked out for like 3 months. My mom was so worried about me and I was worried about me. But I can tell you from that day, 1995, I have never been the same. I have been, there was times where I was just kind of like, forget about it. Let's just forget about that ever happened. And there's a lot of time, a majority of it was spent just fighting for my life, because it seemed like once that happened, then the demonic realm has been in my life. Well, not so much in the last, not as intensely anyway, in the last, I guess, 5 years. It kind of stopped in intensity, but just the understanding and the realization that the demonic realm is very much around, and that we're surrounded by it. But more importantly, it's what's this call on my life? What is it? What did that whole thing mean? And the thing I felt like he was saying was, would you die for even just one of these? When I could see this line of people and be aware that, and they're looking down, and I know in my heart now, looking back, they were on their phones and just hypnotized and just asleep and everything. It was like, will you sacrifice yourself? Will you sacrifice being, going to heaven myself, right then, right there, and coming back and helping humanity? And I remember, yes. And at the same time, when this demonic was kind of coming in, and countering God's move, and then the demonic came in, there were words that I heard, just like the gang stalking and targeted individuals. Those were words that I all heard in the demonic realm. That was in the fallen world that I heard those terms. In the biblical world, those terms would be like children of God, children of the Most High, chosen, a royal priesthood in Second Timothy, I believe, the bride of Christ. That's from the beginning to the end. Watchers, servants of the Lord, on to sons and daughters of the Lord. There's a process that we take. First, we're servants, then we become sons and daughters, then we become friends, and then you become the bride of Christ. I mean, there is certainly, as you journey, as I've gone on in my journey of getting to know the Lord and know him intimately, because he's already known me intimately, and just engaging myself in this relationship and saying yes. I was very aware at that time in my living room too, that there had been an arranged marriage and I was like, what is the arranged marriage? I'm like, I don't understand that. And I also heard words like inheritance, and I heard words like royalty, and I kept seeing like these same commercials for like the winning, like it was better than winning any lottery. Over and over again, I would see that, because just as the demonic would kind of break in and try to terrorize me and basically grip me with fear, and it was fear, but more than any, I don't know if it was fear so much as it was just unbelievable, as just like Close Encounters of the Third Kind. When you're in it and you see this happen in front of you, where you have an open heaven encounter, whether it's angelic or demonic, I mean, there's only so much that the human frame can withstand, and that we can withhold, and wave after wave of supernatural encounter. It just it does something with the ability to measure time as well. Again, I have a really hard time, even now, just even like gaps of time is completely, I mean, it just is a giant blur. And, part of me thinks it was God's being merciful that I don't have to recount every gory detail that happened to me through this process. And it just, I wanted to talk about the day that I died, because truly that day, and I don't even remember the exact date. I know it was the summer of 1995. It was before the Royals played in Mexico City for the preseason game. Again, I had a weird encounter with that, so I remember that specifically, but as far as a reference. But, mourning and grieving is a very, very important part of this process. Mourning and grieving a life that you are leaving behind for something so much better, and taking that on faith, leaving behind your dreams, laying them down. There's a song by Lauren Dangle, I lay each one down at your feet, a mighty warrior, king of the fight. No, you guys might know the song. I came to that realization. It was so much information, so overwhelming. And so, it happened so quickly, yet there was it was just a massive download, but I was just so grief stricken and sorrowful that everything that I'd ever thought about, that I ever wanted, didn't matter. It just didn't matter. And the information was given to me, that kind of like, it was like, oh, it's okay. It was kind of like, this is how it is. This is it. Nothing that I want matters. It wasn't harsh. It was just direct, kind of like, these are your orders and this is what's going to happen. And I felt really guilty for feeling so sad and sorrowful, and that life wasn't like everything I had been told that life was going to be like, or everything that I had dreamed for myself in life was just not going to be my portion. Now, some people, this too was another part of that download that I got. this wasn't for all people. All people were not being called to this kind of a sacrifice or this kind of a knowledge or an awakening. There will be a lot of people, and I can only remember it being like, as far as like my sister goes, this is kind of how it was relayed to me. Just again, there was no talking, it was just a knowing. It was this download from heaven. It's the only way I can explain it to you. Was that, life is not my life is not my own. I belong to him. I heard those words in my mind and in my heart and in my spirit. And there was not going to be this whole American dream. I remember hearing that the American dream is a lie. And the only thing that matters is God, his purpose and his plan. And I mean, it was just this flood of everything that I ever, even just like, when you're growing up and you're thinking about, homecoming football teams, that didn't matter. And, just the rites of passage that we have as children. Yeah. Yeah, it was a message from heaven. Yay. Yeah, it was so overwhelming. And I'm at the same time completely sorrowful because everything that I had ever, like I said, everything that I had ever thought and hoped for and waited for one day and hoped for one day, it wasn't going to be because there was something more. There was something more. And I felt guilty at the same time because it was kind of like I was in the presence. I don't know if it was God so much as if it was almost like his angels were telling me that this is what, and it's very direct and it's very blunt. I don't know if you guys have talked to like a law enforcement officer or a judge where they kind of, and it doesn't matter if they're giving you good news or bad news, they just kind of come the same way with it. And you really have no, if you can relate, if I can relate this to you, it'd be like that. It'd be like if you're standing in front of a judge and he's giving you a verdict, and he's giving you a verdict of one that is in your favor. For example, say you're getting awarded, billions of dollars or whatever the case might be, but he has to read all of these different things and say, whatever the legal thing is, and he is completely like, there's no emotion there. He's just reading it out and it's, nothing wavers. And this is just the fact, that's what it was kind of like. It was kind of like, again, but at the same time, as I'm getting this understanding that I've been called to something more, that this line of people this line of souls were just going to hell, all staring down. And I know it was their phones going to hell. And it was, would you go back for even one? And yes, I will go back for one. And then you could just hear like a chariot of fire pulled up and took one, and you could hear them screaming. They just kind of got carried away, and they were saying yes to the call. And I believe that's why targets are scattered. I believe that's why we're scattered here and there, and that there's very rarely are we all together, because I believe that we're deployed. I believe we're like the 101st Airborne of God's military, of the heavenly military, because I hear so much about in the targeted community about the military being part of this. And I want to take your guys' attention and get you to kind of think of it like this. And thank God that Russ Dizdar wrote that book about the Black Awakening. And I haven't read the book, but I've seen it and I've listened to a little bit of his interviews and stuff like that. But this is something, the thing is that there are two kingdoms. There are two kingdoms. There are two militaries. And I serve in the military of God, our Father in heaven, Jesus Christ. I just want to, whatever I need to say to let you guys know who I serve, because I am very, very proud of serving and of being called, because that's what we are in essence. And so, the enemy would have us look at the armed forces, and and I've heard and I've seen a lot of things about the armed forces and people's backgrounds and different things they might be doing. But I want you guys to understand something. When you're chosen by God to be in his army, and Ezekiel 37 is talks about the valley. Hey, Greg, what's up, Greg? I'm just talking about God's army. And yeah, in the day I died in 1995, when God kind of broke in and told me, that my life was not my own and everything that I've been told was a giant lie, and just the grieving and the mourning of life. But I want to focus and talk about the military. In the targeted in this community, we hear a lot about the military. My friend, targeted man, his name's Greg. He's watching right now, or he was. I don't know if we just lost him, but he was in the Marines, gave his life for this nation. And myself, I was in the Army. And the thing is that there are two kingdoms, there are two militaries. So if you're stalkers, or while you're going through this, if you are believing and seeing the military is following you right now. Okay, Greg, stop it, Greg. You're supposed to be pro. What do you mean by that? Okay, because people are seeing your comments. Look, what do you mean the military is following you? You are the military. Oh, National Guard. Isn't that like, well, anyway, the thing I want to talk about, the thing I want to talk about is that there's two militaries. Okay. Now, when I was taken into man's military at the age of 33, I look back now and I believe that God used that military, that training, to serve in his military. Okay. The wheat and the tares are in it together until the harvest. So if you are being followed by military, if you think that your government is against you, I just urge you to go into spiritual warfare prayer. Just go into prayer, because we have dominion over all of that. Of course, Satan is going to raise up his army. He's, and I mean, get God, and it will not matter about the military. It doesn't matter about the military, but unless you're in God's military, and he is the captain of the host, and that's who I serve. I'm part of his military. And again, like I said, Ezekiel 37. And there's ranks, and there's orders, and there's angels, warring angels. And, so I just want to shout out to that too. But again, that just kind of falls in line with, I didn't think at the age of 33 I was going to go into the Army. I mean, everything that's happened to me a lot in my life has been, God's will and God's plan for me. But getting back to the topic here, I wanted to talk about the day I died, and looking back and my children that have been taken from me over and over again, and the slander campaign that I'm this high dollar escort girl, a call girl, if you will, the slander campaign against me, the sexual assault in the military, every single thing that I've been drugged through has made me the person that I am today. And the person that I am today is dead to self, but alive in Christ. And that means all my hopes, as far as Joey, the things that Joey had, that I had for myself, I really have laid it at the foot of the cross. And my life is not my own. I serve him. And, for those of you that are targeted and being gang stalked, I think that the invitation is going out to you as well, and that God is calling you, and he will continue to do so. And until at some point in your life you said yes. At some point in your heart you're saying you said yes, even before maybe you were born. You said yes to him. So, but I just remember that. It helped me. I appreciated Jeremiah doing that video so much, because it helped me get in touch with that that sorrow and that sadness of losing my life, and that everything was going to be gone, and that I belonged to him. It was so intense, the grief and the loss. Yet at the same time, here I am, and I wouldn't have changed a thing. I'm grateful that I belong to him. And if it were everything that I have to this point, which is a lot compared to what I had, which was absolutely nothing, I wouldn't change it for the world. Because when you're aware that Jesus is looking at you, and that God is proud of you and happy with what you've done, there is nothing that can take away that feeling that you get when you know that the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords is pleased and is saying to you, good job, faithful servant. There's nothing better. but you will go through a period of grief and loss. And I urge you to be compassionate with yourselves, to be loving to yourself as you die to the hopes and dreams that you thought that you had for your life, because our lives don't belong to us. They belong to God. And it's his will and his purpose, what he designed each one of us for. And that's the truth. And you will find happiness and fulfillment and contentment when you finally come to that understanding and belief that and that you're functioning and operating in a way that it serves him. But I did just want to touch on that. And I thought that that was, I mean, a very, very, very powerful video for me. And I haven't done a very good job here, even articulating or setting the stage for that encounter that I had. But I mean, I was forever changed at that moment. That was the day I died. And the day I died and the day I will never forget. But as we, look to our Father and keep our eyes on Jesus, we cannot fail. We will not lose. We will not be shaken. We will not be moved by anything that comes our way. Whether you are in line for a martyr's crown and you are able to die for your faith, or whether you're one of the ones that gets to stay here for the end time battle that's already been won, wherever your role is, praising him all the way, because our reward is eternal and in heaven. And I just want to, my prayers go out to you. And I just really would suggest you read whatever you could about grief and loss and kind of grieving that so that you can accept your new identity and your new self in the Lord. And it might be a little bit easier instead of running away from your call for like 20 years like I did. Anyway, I don't know if I did a very good job, but I wanted to speak to that because there is so much truth in that. Dying to self, dying to what you believe you wanted, what you wanted for your life, because really our lives are not our own. We belong to him, and there's no place I would rather be. So that's pretty much all I wanted to say, but I'm praying for everyone, and be good to yourselves and to each other. Thanks. Have a good night. Oh, thanks, Melissa. Take care.